to my channel. My name is Regina and today's video is all about caring for and potting up seedlings. So if you watched my video on summer garden seed starting, then you got to see me start the seeds for my summer garden. I started almost all the plants. The only thing I haven't started yet that I'll actually be starting this evening are my watermelon and cucumber. And that's because they grow so quickly, they don't need 6 weeks. So it has been 2 weeks since I started those seeds and 4 weeks until the date that I plan to get them out in my garden or to start putting them in my garden when I know it'll be warm enough. So those plants have started growing and they still have plenty of time to go. Now, because I started them in very small trays, then a lot of the plants, especially my peppers and my tomatoes, are gonna need to be potted up. In these 2 weeks, my tomatoes have grown significantly, so I'm gonna start the process of potting them up. Now, I could wait, they're not root bound or anything like that, but because I have so many tomatoes, I'm gonna start them today and then I'll just do a few here and there until I get them all potted up. So that keeps me from having to spend hours and hours just one day getting them potted, because sometimes I'm a little slow if I'm being honest. So first off, I want to show you guys just a quick peek at what those seedlings look like right now and how I've been taking care of them and how I care for all of my seedlings. And then we'll get to the potting up, the preparing these cups, because I'll actually be using these 9-ounce cups for my tomatoes. And since I'm only keeping them indoors 6 weeks, these will be big enough for the rest of the time. How I put holes in them, all of that stuff. And so you guys get to see that whole process in case you're wanting to replicate this for yourself. So first off, let's take a look at the seedlings. They actually are here behind me. This is one of my grow shelves. If you haven't seen my other videos, I have this one, and then I have a shorter one that's 3 feet wide. This one is 4 feet wide, and it has 5 shelves, I believe. Now, I have curtains on this shelf because the lights, they produce a lot of light. And my eyes kind of get used to it when I'm in here, but after a while, it kind of is bothersome. So if you have your plants growing in a room that you're using for other things, and I do, this is the room where I keep all my plant stuff, but I also have my desk in here, my computer, you probably see the side of my monitor over here. I have bookshelves in here, so I do my planning work for homeschool, I do all kinds of stuff. Essentially, everything that I need to do on a computer, I do in this room. And my kids even come in here sometimes to do some of their schoolwork when they want to be somewhere else. So this room, we use it for a lot of things, even though it's a pretty small office. And so I want it to be inhabitable. So I have these curtains. These are just blackout curtains. And I cover the shelf with this so that it doesn't produce so much light. So here are my seedlings. They're only using right now the bottom 3 shelves. That will change once I start potting them up. Here on the top shelf are the flowers that I planted. These are marigolds, zinnias, I have some daisies here, and on the edge some blue boy something, and some coleus here. What has not come up in these 2 weeks have been the Johnny Jump Ups. I got these seeds from a friend, but I got them last year, so they might not be viable anymore. I have some seeds, some of these that I purchased, so I'm going to plant some more in here. And if I have to put them outside a little bit later, then I'm fine with that. But these flowers have gotten quite tall, and this is just 2 weeks since I planted these seeds. And then this tray, I actually planted these a little later. I want to say about 5 days after this first tray, because I had to order these seeds. And these are also marigolds, but these are French marigolds, Dainty Mariettas, and Sparky Mix. And then here on the end, I have Snapdragons. And they are doing great. Okay, so now here on the second shelf, these are peppers, a variety of different sweet peppers. I'm not potting these up today. As you can see, they have, most of them have sprouted, but I don't have any true leaves on them yet, so they're still really small. Peppers took, some of them took an entire week, some of them took even more than that, like 8 or 9 days to actually sprout, so they're not as far along as the tomatoes are. These are tomatoes. I actually planted these though just a week ago, a week later, because I realized I didn't have as many of these honeycomb hybrid plants I wanted for my plant sale, so I just put a few more seeds in. I'll move these guys out of the way. Now back here we have some herbs. and they are doing great. Some sage, some peppermint, parsley, cilantro, chives, all kinds of things happening in there. So those are gonna be okay in these cells for a while. Now here I have tomatoes. Now these tomatoes, they have grown, they have their initial leaves. I cannot remember what those are called. And then they also have true leaves, which is why I'm ready to start potting them up. Yeah, they're growing like crazy. Here we have some more herbs, basil, and a few other types, lavender back there, rosemary, starting to grow, looking great. More peppers. Here we have squash. This is 2 weeks of growth. Now, 2 of my zucchinis and 2 of my yellow squash did not sprout, but that's okay. I only needed 2 of each, and I have 4 of each, so I'm good. And these seeds are pretty old, so I'm not surprised that the rate on them, germination rate, wasn't that high. But if you take a look at this plant, I'm actually gonna pot these up. I didn't realize they would grow this big this fast. I knew they would grow. But this is a zucchini. And if you look at the bottom, the roots are already circling the bottom of this cup. And that's why I didn't plant the watermelon yet, but I didn't realize this was gonna grow that fast. So I'll be potting these up today as well. We don't want them to get root bound. And then down here, have more tomatoes. 2 weeks of growth, y'all. That's all it takes. Amish paste and Roma. Under here I have peppers. I have a few that have not sprouted. My jalapeno did not sprout. I'm gonna try that again. I also use really old seeds for those too, so I guess the germination rate wasn't very good. And also I have eggplant here and tomatillos, so they're all looking great. And these are a couple of tomato plants I decided to plant here. More tomatoes, a few different varieties here. And then behind them, these are some more herbs and ground cherries. Ground cherries on the end, and then different types of basil in all the other rows. And then this tray of tomatoes. These are the ones I'm going to start with today, potting up. As you can see, these are the biggest ones. So as you saw, that was a ton of growth in just 2 weeks. So if you're wondering whether or not you should start your plants from seed, I definitely recommend it. They grow so fast, and it's just really amazing to see something go from seeds 2 weeks ago in this tray to now I have more than 30 tomato plants here. And so these are going to be the first ones I pot up because they are the biggest. So what I did with my plants, now like I told you before, you saw my video where I planted them. To take care of my seedlings, what I do is I water them whenever they need it. So once the top is dry, and with this vermiculite, it's kind of really easy to see whether or not it's still damp or if it's dry. So whenever they need watering, I do. I bottom water, which is why I have them in these pans, obviously. So I just pour water into the pan, let the plant soak it up. After about 30 minutes, if there's any water left, then I'll just pour that into the next pan. Until, you know, it's all soaked up, because you don't want them sitting in water for an extended period of time. But the plants will soak it up, and that makes sure that the roots are being trained to grow down. And yeah, so that's how I water them. And I do that every few days. And the smaller the cell, the more frequently you're gonna have to water, because the more frequently it's going to run out of water. The more frequently it's gonna dry out. And so the other thing that I do with them, once they start having their first set of true leaves, that's when I start with the fertilizer. And that's just because the mixture that I use, that I grow them in, it's just peat moss and vermiculite. So there isn't any, it's a soilless mixture, there aren't any nutrients in it. Now, of course, the plant has enough nutrients to you know, emerge, become a plant, and grow for a little while just from the from the seed. But once their true leaves start forming, that's when I go ahead and start on their fertilizer regime. I want to grow nice, strong plants that are going to grow for me through the heat the entire summer. So I want to make sure they get the best start possible. So I fertilize them with half-strength fertilizer. I use a synthetic fertilizer in my house. It's just elements, you know, so make sure it has N, P, and K in it. It's perfectly safe for you and your plants. It doesn't do anything like alter your DNA or anything crazy like that. It's just whether or not it was derived in its form naturally, or if the elements were put together as a fertilizer, you know, man-made. So I use that in the house. The reason why is because all the organic ones are really smelly. They smell like fish, which is fine for me to use outside, and that's what I use on my raised beds. But in the house, no. I'm not having a house smell like fish because I'm growing plants. So I use a synthetic fertilizer. I just use Miracle-Gro. I use the same one that I use for my house plants, except that I dilute it to half strength. And here, I'll show you. I just have a gallon jug. This one was a vinegar jug. I use this. I have it labeled so that I know which one is fertilizer. I mean, it is light blue, so you can kind of tell. And then I have a gallon jug, a milk jug, repurposed, that I use for water. Because you don't need like a sprayer or anything with holes when you're bottom watering. So it doesn't really matter. And so what I do with the fertilizer is I fertilize them once a week, about once every 7 days. And the way I keep up with that is that I put a label on the pan, and I just write the date on it when I fertilize. The reason why I have to do it that way rather than writing it like in a journal is because when I fertilize them, it's when they need water. So I have to wait until they're dry. I don't want to overwater them. And so once it's been, you know, close to a week and I see them dry, then I'll use the fertilizer. And so it's not always the same day on every tray. They dry out sometimes at different times. They don't all exactly need water at the same time. So I just write the date, and so I know I fertilize these, and they've only had one fertilizer application. It's only been 2 weeks since they were planted. But I fertilized them on the 8th, which was, you know, 4 days ago. And so I know once it's, you know, the 12th, or not the 12th, that's today. Once it's a week after that, around the 15th, you know, and if they're dry, then I know that's when I need to fertilize them. But that's when I'll kind of start looking to see, okay, these are dry, they need water. Okay, I'll use my fertilizer water instead of just my regular water. So it's that simple. But I just put these little labels on all of the different pans, and that's how I keep track of when they've been fertilized, so that I don't overdo it and so that I don't forget any of them. So these guys, in order to plant them up, said these are tomatoes. So I'll show you that process in just a minute. But before I do that, to show you the plants, before I do that, I am going to get these cups ready to be planted. So I wanted to show you guys that process too. Now, as far as caring for the seedlings, keeping them under the lights, watering them, and fertilizing them, that's essentially it. That's the entire process of caring for seedlings. And that's why I only grow them. I don't like to grow them super early. Last year I grew them way too early, and I was dealing with those plants forever, and it was a pain. If you grow them in just the amount of time that you need, then all you really do is have to water, fertilize, make sure they get light, and by the time they're big enough to need other things like pruning and stuff like that, they're going to be outdoors. So to pot these guys up, now what I pot them up into, I use the exact same mixture I use for seed starting to pot them up. So it's still that 3 parts peat moss, 1 part vermiculite that I used when I started the seed. So I don't change that up. Some people will change it up and add something like worm castings, or maybe use a potting mix that has fertilizer in it. I just don't bother. To be honest, I don't want to buy those other ingredients, and I did it this way last year and it worked great. I used the fertilizer, so they're fine. They're only spending 6 weeks, and then they get to go outside and live their best lives and compost and all that great stuff. So these cups are that I'm going to use to pot up my tomatoes. Now, if you were keeping them any longer, like about 8 weeks, then I would recommend these larger cups, these 16-ounce red cups. But since they're only going to be in this cup for 4 weeks, so they'll be a 6-week-old plant, this cup will be big enough. If it was going to be any longer, I'd use the red one. These cups I bought at Dollar Tree. So 28 cups here for $1. Actually, keep forgetting, they went up $1.25 for these 28 cups. And these 16-ounce cups, I bought these at Dollar Tree today, and these are, it's 16 cups. Yeah, okay. 16 cups, 16 ounces each. But these are $1 for 16. So the 9-ounce cups, $1 for 28, $1.25 for 28. 16-ounce cups, $1.25 for 16. And then I also saw these there, and they had a 6-pack, and these are actually like seed starting planters. They have these at Dollar Tree. And I bought these because they were nice and big. I'm going to use these for my watermelon seedlings and to pot up those squash. I could have put them in here, but these were 6 in a package for $1.25, which, you know, is a little pricey considering I get 28 of these. But they were nice and big, and I only had a few plastic that were this size from last year, so I wanted a few more. So I got these also, and it was a pack of 6 for $1.25. All right, so for these cups, obviously they need drainage holes. So what I do, I just drill holes in them with my drill. Keep it simple, right? So I usually stack them a few cups, maybe like about 5 or 6 at a time, works. And then I drill holes in it. You wanna see? Okay, I'm gonna show you. So here's my electric drill. I do not, oh wait, yes I do. Okay, this is a 1/4-inch drill bit that I'm using on it. I was about to say I don't know, because I don't know a lot about drills except that this works for me and I use it to build things. But this is a 1/4 inch because it's labeled. And I use this to drill holes in the cups. And you want to be careful not to drill through, you know, your floor or the table. This is an old changing table turned into a potting up table. So simple enough. I'll do the rest of them off camera so you guys don't have to watch that. But yeah, I just drilled 3 holes because these cups aren't very big on the bottom. So just 3 holes, enough to make sure that they get really nice drainage. And that's it. Okay, so I have holes drilled in all of the cups that I am using today. And I have these set up on a tray. This is actually a cookie sheet. I have some aluminum pans that I use. I have some plastic pans. I use all kinds of things. But the aluminum cookie sheets are good for those small cells, like for these. But when you get the heavier, these cups in them, a whole bunch of them, they actually are not strong enough. So I have like an actual metal cookie sheet. Well, I guess aluminum is metal. You know what I mean. Cookie sheet, a stronger metal one. And I got that at Dollar Tree also for $1.25. But it was $1.25 for each one. So I bought a few of those. We'll see how those work as trays. I looked around for some other ideas for things used as trays, and this seemed like the best bet. So I've put soil in a couple of these so I can just show you how I potted my tomatoes. Tomatoes you pot a little bit differently than your other vegetables, which is why I'm bothering to show you. But once the tomatoes grow, I'm gonna pull this guy out. So another reason I'm potting these up, I'll zoom in on this if it doesn't show well, but the roots are going all the way down to the bottom of that cell. Like the roots are growing in this guy, so they're ready to be potted up. I don't want it to get root bound and then circle around the bottom and possibly hinder the plant's growth. But tomatoes, they're gonna grow roots. This stem is like fuzzy because it's gonna grow roots on this entire stem. So when you pot up your tomatoes, you want to pot them all the way up whenever, and you do this also when you bury them outside. You bury like 2/3 of the plant. When I pot up my tomatoes, I pretty much pot them almost all the way up to the top to where the leaves begin. And that way, that'll help to strengthen the root system, because all of that that's buried will actually grow roots. And then the plant will have plenty of space to grow up. So that's why I've only filled these about halfway. And then I'll fill the soil in around them. Now, if I had a little bit longer, and I was putting them in these red cups, then I could actually put this in the cup and then and plant it only halfway in the cup. And as the plant grows, you can actually add in soil around it so that it can stay in the same cup. And I know people that do pot their tomatoes like that. They just start them in a red cup, start them at the bottom, plant the seed, and only fill the soil about, a third of the way. And then when it grows, then they add a little more soil and a little more soil. And that way they are starting in a smaller cup, but they also are able to, you don't have to pot them up, and they're still able to establish that really strong root system. And I think it's a great way to pot tomatoes. To plant tomatoes. The only reason I don't do it is because when it's so low, then I end up having to have the lights. Like if I have the lights here, it's still not quite as close as I want them, because I don't have like those crazy strong grow lights. Since I'm using shop lights, I have to be pretty close to the plant when it's small. So it's easier for me to have them in something where they can grow up out of it. But that's just my preference. So gonna plant this guy in here. So notice the top of the plant is just barely sticking up. And that's how I want it. So now I'll fill in the soil. I just spilled that. I'm always spilling on this thing. Usually after I plant stuff, I just wait until the next day because I want this soil to dry, and then I just get my vacuum and vacuum up everything I can't just pick up. And it's done. Now I'm considering topping these guys with a little layer of vermiculite on the top, but I don't know. I heard that can help prevent fungus gnats from boring in, but I don't currently have any fungus gnats. I haven't seen any. I am going to put out my sticky traps, and I do recommend that you do that as well, only because I have house plants, and sometimes they just, I don't know if they come in from outside, I don't know. Sometimes I'll see a few, and I don't want them to establish, so I like to have sticky traps out, even when I haven't seen any fungus gnats, just because those are kind of a warning system. They'll catch a fungus gnat, and then I know that I need to start paying attention, and I'll usually treat everything with the mosquito bits, the water and mosquito bits too, because if you see a fungus gnat, then they've already laid eggs somewhere. So I heard though that vermiculite as a kind of a mulch helps to prevent them from burrowing in. So I may actually do that. But I don't want to run out of vermiculite, so I don't know. We'll see. I'll decide at the end. But yeah, so here's this tomato plant, completely potted. Notice I put the soil all the way up almost to the very top. I might add just a teeny bit more of this plant. And it'll be good in here for the next 4 weeks. And that's how long it takes. I cannot talk today. It'll be good in here for the next 4 weeks, and then it'll be time for it to be planted outdoors. Now the last week before I plant these guys outside, I will start taking them out a few hours at a time at first for the first 2 or 3 days. And then I'll probably leave them out all day. And if the weather's nice, I might just leave them out all day and all night once they've been out a few days and gotten used to the sun. Because, you know, indoor lights are great for growing, but they aren't the sun, so the plants do have to get used to it. So you always want to harden off your seedling, especially the summer ones, because I know here in Texas that sun is intense in the warmer months. So I always harden them off a few hours at a time and just kind of increase the time little by little. And then eventually, if the weather's nice, then I can just leave them all out, because it is kind of a pain to be taking them out and bringing them back in, taking them out, bringing them back in. So I only like to do that a couple of days and then eventually just leave them out and let them get acclimated to being outdoors before I actually plant them. And I think that probably helps. This is not scientific because I didn't look this up, but I'm guessing that probably helps with transplant shock too, because if they're already used to the sun and used to being outside, then all they're having to adjust to when you plant them in the ground is, you know, just the transplantation and dealing with that. They're not having to worry about, okay, I've just been transplanted into a new environment. Also, this sun is bugging. So that's another benefit of hardening them off, and then maybe a few days before you plant them outside, just leave them outside. So here we go. 1 tomato down in this tray. I think I counted about 38 plants. This is 30 cells, but in a couple of the cells I put an extra seed. Not in most of the cells I just put one, but a few of them I put an extra seed just in case one of them didn't come up. And because tomato plants have very fibrous roots and they're pretty strong, then I can use all of the plants that have come up. So I have a couple more than 30 in here. So the ones where there's 2 plants together, I'll be pulling those apart and potting them separately. Oh, I should pay attention to what this is. And these are Roma. Another great thing about these plastic cups is that I can just write on them what they are. I don't know where my Sharpie is, I'll have to go get it. But yeah, I'll just write on here, and then when I use them next year, I'll just cross it out. Now I do reuse these cups. I have several outside from last year in my deck box, but this year I'm growing more plants than I did last year, so I know I needed more. Also, I learned today, or yesterday, when I went out there was gonna go ahead and get those, wash them, make sure they're all washed and get started for today, but there were a bunch of ants in there, and I don't want to deal with ants. So I told my husband, and he is going to get them all out for me and get a tub of water and, you know, rinse everything out so that I don't have to deal with ants. Y'all, I hate ants so much. I actually just, as a gardener, I'm probably very bug averse as a gardener because I don't like any bugs. But there are ones that I tolerate and I deal with. But ants are on my list of persona non grata. So I don't want to deal with ants, fire ants, and so he's going to take care of those and get them in here for me. So I decided to go ahead and use the new ones first. I also today went out there and, not in my deck box I already pulled out, these big containers. I'm sure I got them from a nursery a few years ago, or from, you know, when I bought some plants. And so I'm using these as well as these, you know, for watermelon, cucumber. And I brought these into the house today because I potted up some blueberries. I did a video on that. Probably noticed the same outfit once I get that video edited. But I brought these in the house because I know I was going to use these today. And y'all, I put them in my sink to wash them, and there was a gecko inside of one of them, and I about lost it. I love gardening, but I am not that into animals. Like, I like them, I want them to exist, I like geckos. I'm happy to see them in the garden because I know they eat things and, you know, ecosystem. But I don't want them near me or like inside my house. So I, you know, screamed really loud, and my husband had to take care of it. Thank God he's good with stuff like that, but he had to take it outside, and then I just didn't want to touch any of them. So I was like, you have to clean all those out and then bring them to me because I have to know there's nothing living in them. All right, so I'm gonna get these guys potted up as well, and I'll show you that finished product. So here's one of my lovely zucchini plants, and like I showed you earlier, the roots are circling around this thing. This guy is root bound already. Like, what? 2 weeks. Okay, so I'm gonna put, trying to decide. I think I'm gonna put the zucchini in, well, I mean, I only have 4 of these, so I guess I put some of them in here. guess I'll put the zucchini in here. And yeah, we'll just do it. I'll put the zucchini in this guy, and hopefully they're okay for the next 4 weeks. But next year, I'm only going to I'm going to start zucchini when I have only 4 weeks to go. And if the weather is nice, I could get them out a little earlier because I'm going to plant these in containers. So if the weather is nice, you know, in 2 weeks, and I can get them out, then I will. So I'll use that as a determination too. So I'm going to put these in these much larger containers. They're not quite taller. They're a little taller, but they're definitely like a lot wider, like twice as wide, so much bigger. Now, the zucchini and the squash have not been fertilized yet, and they do have some true leaves coming in. The reason why is because they just hadn't needed water. I was waiting for them to be dry once I started fertilizing the tomatoes. And with these larger cups, they just don't dry out as quickly. And so I hadn't fertilized them yet. So when I water them in today, I'll use the fertilizer water. But potting up is pretty simple. Just kind of squeeze it like this, the cup, and hold it by the stem. I'm going to get my table completely dirty. Here's my plant. And there you can see the roots circling around the bottom and all the way through. It's another thing I like about these translucent cups. It's kind of cool to get to see the roots like that. I think it's cool at least. So I'm going to pull this apart. These roots apart a little bit. Once again, y'all, 2 weeks. Planted these seeds 2 weeks ago. So probably should have just not put any soil in here, I guess. So here is my potted up zucchini. And the zucchini, you pot that at the same level it was growing. You don't plant it any deeper. It does no benefit to the plant. And it might actually be a hindrance if it causes the stem to rot. So you just plant it at the same level at which it was already growing. But now this guy's got a lot more space. He's going to be a lot happier. All right, so I'll get the rest of these planted and also plant my cucumber and watermelon seeds. You don't necessarily have to watch that, so I won't do that on camera. You've seen me plant a seed before. And then I'll show you the finished product. All right, so I have finished transplanting all of the tomatoes from that tray that I wanted to transplant today. And I've also potted up all of the squash and zucchini into these larger containers. They're already on the shelf behind me. It is late, so I'm trying to not talk too loud because there are people in my house sleeping and I'm really tired. But here's one of the trays of tomatoes. So like I said, you pot them really deep because they'll grow roots all along where that stem was. So they're actually in there very deep. And yeah, so this is my life now because I have a lot of these trays of tomatoes to pot up over the next week or so. So I'll be doing that pretty much every day, living in this mess right here. But very exciting. And I cannot wait to get these guys out into the garden in April, so next month. But yeah, the tomatoes look amazing. I'm very excited about them, and so does the squash. I also am about to, and I'll actually finish this tomorrow, starting the seeds of my cucumbers and my watermelon that I mentioned before because they don't need nearly as much time. 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes just 2 weeks is all they need inside just to get a teeny bit of a head start on that season. We have a long growing season, so last year I actually started some indoors and then I started some of them just seeds outside, direct sow, and they were fine because they grow so quickly. but I'll finish those up tomorrow. I stopped because I ran out of my potting mix. I have more of it, but when I mix it, I use boiling water to moisten it to make sure I kill any, you know, fungus, gnat eggs, or anything that might be in it. And it's kind of late for me to be boiling water, so I'll just wait and make another batch of the mix tomorrow and finish up starting those seeds. But these plants are ready to go. Put them on the shelf, and then tomorrow I'll have to come in here and adjust. I've turned off most of the lights, but I'll have to come in here and adjust this shelf, bring it down a little closer to the plants here, and I might need to adjust the height actually of all of these because now that the plants have grown. But yeah, they'll go on this shelf and they'll continue growing for the next 4 weeks till they go out into the garden. So I wanted to give you guys an updated look at how everything is going. So this is Monday, it's 2 days later from when I first started upplanting these tomatoes. And since then I've upplanted a few more. So and I have still have a couple of trays more to pot up. Upplant, pot up, I use those terms interchangeably. But everything is looking great. So here I have those watermelons and the Sharon Tice melon planted in these containers, these rather large ones. And then here are my cucumbers. I have a Sumter cucumber and an Armenian yard-long cucumber that I'm growing. 2 plants in each container, because when you plant them outside, you usually plant a couple close together. So I'll leave them like that. These are I'm growing on an arched trellis. And then here are the rest of the seedlings, the peppers, and here I have, you know, all the herbs. You've seen them. And so as I pot up more of these items of peppers, I probably won't pot up until next week. As you can see, they're still quite small. They're starting to get some true leaves in there, but they won't need to be potted up quite yet. So I'll pot those up next week. And then here are the tomatoes that I've potted up. And back there you can see the squash as well. But yeah, as I pot up more plants, then I'll take up, I still have 2 rows on this shelf that I am not using yet. I have these here, and when I close my curtains here, it keeps all of that heat in, so it's the perfect warm environment for those seeds to germinate. But as I pot things up, then obviously they're going to take up more space. And so I'll spread things out to take up more space on more rows. And then also I have my whole other shelf. That's my 3-foot shelf as well. So I'll have plenty of space for everything as I pot things up. But yeah, it's a final look at how things are growing for this summer's garden. Just about 4 weeks and these guys will be planted out in the garden and we'll be well into our warm weather spring and summer growing season. Thank you for sticking around till the end of this video. I hope you found this content helpful, and also go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. It helps to increase the reach of this video and increase the reach of my channel, which I would greatly appreciate. So until I see you guys again, thank you and have a great one.